All right, boys and gerbils, you're now on my iPhone, recording another video earlier, 2nd Thessalonians, on my laptop. The laptop just took a crap. So, iPhone it is, improvise, adapt, overcome. We are in 1 Kings chapter 14 today, roughly page 367 in the scriptures. What's the scriptures? Google it. It's a new translation based upon the original source texts with none of the political or ideological ambitions to skew words or phrases a certain way. I like it a lot. But in essence, it's a Bible. So, chapter 14, we're back to this guy named Ahiah and Jeroboam. Jeroboam was the king of Israel, not of Judah, which we're going to touch on in a minute. But Jeroboam was an abomination. If we look back just a few verses, Jeroboam, verse 33 in 1333, after this event, Jeroboam did not turn from his evil ways, but again he made priests from all sorts of people for the high places. He appointed whatever priest he wanted to. Sounds familiar. Modern Christendom. Whoever wished he ordained to become one of the priests of the high places. Interesting. And this matter was a sin to the house of Jeroboam, even to cut it off and destroy it from the face of the earth, to say nothing of the Asherim, the giant penises that they worshipped, which you may know as obelisks, which also, surprisingly, now get put on top of buildings, houses of worship, and are referred to as steeples. I know, tragic, but what did Immanuel Kant say? If the truth shall kill them, then let them die. At the time, Ahiah, the son of Jeroboam, became sick, and Jeroboam said to his wife, "Please arise and disguise yourself, so they do not know that you are the wife of Jeroboam, and go to Shiloh. See, Ahiah the prophet is there." So Ahiah is the son of Jeroboam. Ahiah is the prophet who spoke to me of becoming king over this people. And you shall take with you 10 loaves and cakes and a jar of honey and go to him. The cakes were probably cakes of dates or raisins, but whatever. Let him declare to you what becomes of the child. So, hey, I'm an evil king. My kid is sick. Wife, go see the prophet Ahiah and see what he has to say. He's the same guy that said I would be king. Let's go check with him about the kid. And Jeroboam's wife did so, and rose up and went to Shiloh, and came to the house of Ahiah. But Ahiyahu, or Ahiah, was unable to see, for his eyes had set because of his age. So he was old and he was blind. And Yahweh, the Lord our God, had said to Ahiyahu, "See, the wife of Jeroboam is coming to ask you a word about her son, for he is sick. Speak to her thus and thus, say this. For it shall be, when she comes in, that she makes herself strange," meaning makes herself strange as in not known who it is. Right? See, Jeroboam said, "Disguise yourself, so they do not know that you are the wife of Jeroboam." She made herself strange. And it came to be, verse 6, when Ahiyahu heard the sound of her footsteps, the prophet, as she came through the door, he said, "Come in, wife of Jeroboam." So he's old man, he's blind. She's disguised herself, and he still says, "Come in, wife of Jeroboam." She probably goes, "Oh, snap, the jig is up." She knew at that point, I've been made. "Come in, wife of Jeroboam. Why are you making yourself strange? And I have been sent to you with a hard wood. Sorry, been cutting trees today. A hard word," the prophet had for the wife of Jeroboam. Verse 7, "Go, say to Jeroboam, thus said Yahweh, Elohim of Israel, because I exalted you from among the people, and made you ruler over my people Israel, and taught my people Israel." See that? Israel. The Father's people is Israel. We're going to talk about replacement theology here in a minute. But the Father's people is Israel. Genesis 32. The tree of life as a Gentile believer in Messiah that you're grafted into is Israel. Go read Revelation 21 and 22. You want to be Israel. It's bad for everybody who's not Israel. You can see the judgment, and I don't mean the nation state on the map, that secular nation of Israel. I mean the Father's chosen people. Israel talks about people. Israel is people, not a nation or a state or a place. It's people. And made you ruler over my people Israel, and tore the reign, the kingdom, away from the house of David, and gave it to you. And you have not been as my servant David, who, Israel, guarded my commands, and followed me with all his heart, to do only what was right in my eyes. But you have done more evil than all who were before you, for you have gone and made yourself other mighty ones, false gods, and molded images to provoke me, and have cast me behind your back. Therefore, see, I am bringing evil to the house of Jeroboam, and shall cut off from Jeroboam every male in Israel, whether shut up or left at large, and sweep away the remnant of the house of Jeroboam, as one sweeps away dung until it is all gone. Those of Jeroboam who die in the city, the dogs do eat. You're going to be dog food, homie. And those who die in the fields, the birds of the heaven do eat, for Yahweh has spoken it. Interesting tie-in here. We were just talking about Revelation 19. If we go to 19, which is Yeshua on a white horse bringing judgment to the nations, we can see the last verse is 19:21. And the rest were killed of the sword which came out of the mouth of him, Yeshua, who sat on the horse, and all the birds were filled with their flesh. So, what an interesting tie-in. Almost as if, it's like a coincidence or something. And those who die in the field, this field of battle that Yeshua's on, the birds of the heaven do eat, for Yahweh has spoken it. Well, why are they dying? Because they abandoned Yah. They're not guarding his commands with all their heart. What an interesting concept. Almost as if over here in Yeshua, where it says, and out of his mouth goes a sharp sword. Revelation 19. You know what? We'll just start 19:11. And I saw the heaven opened, and there was a white horse, and he who sat on him was called trustworthy and true, and in righteousness, Luke 1 verse 6, blamelessly walking in the commands, and in righteousness, and in blamelessly walking in the commands, Yeshua judges and makes war. And his eyes were as a flame of fire, and on his head were many crowns, having a name that had been written, which no one perceived except himself. And having been dressed in a robe dipped in blood, his name is called the Word of Yahuwah. And the armies in the heaven, dressed in fine linen, white and clean, followed him, Yeshua, on white horses. And out of his mouth goes a sharp sword, that with it he should smite the nations. With it he should smite the nations. Remember that. And he shall shepherd them with a rod of iron, and he treads the winepress of the fierceness and wrath of El Shaddai, Father God. And on his robe and on his thigh he has a name written, King of Kings and Master of Masters. And I saw one messenger, one angel, standing in the sun, and he cried out with a loud voice, saying to all the birds that fly in mid-heaven, and those who die in the field, the birds of the heavens do eat, for Yahweh has spoken it, saying to all the birds that fly in mid-heaven, come and gather together for the supper of the great Elohim, to eat the flesh of kings. What is Ahiyahu talking about to the wife of Jeroboam in 1 Kings 14? To eat the flesh of kings, and the flesh of commanders, and the flesh of strong ones, and the flesh of horses, and of those who sit on them, and the flesh of all people, free and slave, both small and great. And I saw the beast and the kings of the earth and their armies gathered together to fight him, Yeshua, who sat on the horse, and his army. And the beast was seized, and with him the false prophet, who worked signs in his presence, by which he led astray those who received the mark of the beast, and those who worshipped his image. The two were thrown alive into the lake of fire burning with sulfur. And the rest were killed with the sword which came from the mouth of him, Yeshua, who sat on the white horse. And all the birds were filled with their flesh. What a concept. Those of Jeroboam, 14:11, 1 Kings 14 verse 11. Those of Jeroboam who die in the city, the dogs do eat, and to those who die in the fields, the birds of the heavens do eat, for Yahweh has spoken it. And you, arise, go to your house, when your feet enter the city, the child shall die. Remember, the whole reason she came in the first place was to find out what's going to happen with this kid. The child shall die, and all Israel shall mourn for him and bury him, for he is the only one of Jeroboam who shall come to the burial site where they bury the kings and the families of the kings, because he's the only one without sin. He's the only one who's below the age of responsibility. He's the only one who shall come to the burial site, because in him there is found a good report towards Yahweh Elohim of Israel in the house of Jeroboam. So just that one kid is allowed to be buried with all the other kings in the burial place. And Yahweh shall raise up for himself a king over Israel, who cuts off the house of Jeroboam this day and even now. And Yahweh shall strike Israel as a reed is shaken in the water, and shall pluck Israel from this good soil which he gave to their fathers, and shall scatter them beyond the river, because they made their Asherim provoking Yahweh. What is Asherim? Giant phallic symbols that we worship. That's what they are. Asherah, Asherim, Ashtaroth, Ishtar, Easter. Yeah, all goes together. And he shall give Israel up because of the sins of Jeroboam, who sinned and who made Israel sin. End quote. And the wife of Jeroboam rose up and went and came to Tirzah. And when she came to the threshold of the house, the child died, just as the prophet said. And they buried him, and all Israel lamented for him, according to the word of Yahweh, which he spoke through his servant Ahiyahu the prophet. And the rest of the acts of Jeroboam, how he fought and how he reigned, see, they are written in the book of the annals of the sovereign of Israel, Book of Kings. And the days that Jeroboam reigned was 22 years, so he slept with his fathers, he died. And Nadab his son reigned in his place. Meanwhile, while all this was going on, Rehoboam the son of Solomon reigned in Judah, the house of Israel and the house of Judah. Two house. We've talked about two house before in other videos. Recommend you go back channel and watch those, or just read 1 Kings. Two house. Meanwhile, Rehoboam the son of Solomon reigned in Judah. Rehoboam was 41 years old when he became king, and he reigned 17 years in Jerusalem, the city which Yahweh had chosen out of all the tribes of Israel to put his name there. And his mother's name was Naamah, the Ammonites. The Ammonites, they were supposed to catch one to the dome when Joshua brought the Israelites into the promised land, but they didn't. And Judah did evil in the eyes of Yahweh, and they provoked him to jealousy with their sins. What is sin? 1 John 3 verse 4, transgression of the law, more than all their fathers had done. For they also built for themselves high places and pillars, and Asherim on every high hill, and under every green tree. Go on telling yourself that Christmas is, and that Christmas tree is all about the birth of Messiah. Definitely don't do any research at all and determine that he was born probably during Sukkot, not on the winter solstice. And definitely don't Google Tammuz, Tammuz. Don't do that at all. Just continue onward with your blinders on. That's going to be great. It's going to be great. You just keep doing whatever abominations you want to do. Verse 24, and there were also cult prostitutes in the land. They did according to all the abominations of the nations which Yahweh dispossessed before the children of Israel. So, that particular chapter right there, or verse rather, 24, they did according to all the abominations of the nations which Yahweh dispossessed before the children of Israel. So remember that if you know anything about replacement theology, the idea that Israel was Father's chosen people and now the church is, right? That blessing fell off of Israel and then moved to the church. First of all, that's not biblical at all. But second of all, if that was true, Let's look at 1 Kings 14, verse 24, because remember the inerrancy doctrine of 1978, that the entirety of this word is divinely inspired doctrine, and it is profitable for reproof and instruction. Yeah, did you know it was just in 1978 that the church at large agreed that, yeah, it turns out the whole Bible is true. Right? Let's trust in men some more. Replacement theology. They did according to all the abominations of the nations which Yahweh dispossessed before the children of Israel. Modern Christendom. Here's your sign. If you replaced Israel because of these things, which you did not biblically, but if you did, what in the world makes you think you still have the Father's blessing? Doing according to all the abominations of the nations. Easter, spring equinox, fertility worship, Christmas, winter solstice, fertility worship, the evergreen tree. That was Tammuz's penis, by the way. Yeah, definitely don't Google that. Molech, Santa Claus, putting your kids, screaming kids in the lap of Santa Claus. Yeah, Molech, M-O-L-E-C-H or M-O-L-E-K. Definitely don't Google that at all. Verse 25, and it came to be in the 5th year of King Rehoboam that Shishak, king of Mitzrayim of Egypt, came up against Jerusalem, and he took away the treasures of the house of Yahweh. So they won in battle, and he took away from the temple all the treasures, and the treasures of the king's house. He even took away all, and he took away the shields of gold which Solomon had made, because the father's hand had come off of him. And King Rehoboam made shields of bronze to replace them, and entrusted them into the hands of the chief of the guard, who guarded the entrance of the king's house. So the shields of gold which were in the temple were replaced with shields of bronze, which ended up in the king's house. Now, gold is not very good for warfare. It's a soft metal, bronze was of the age, right? That's warfare. And instead of trusting in the gold shields representing the Father's blessing in the temple, we're now going to trust in the bronze shields, which we keep inside the king's house. And it came to be, whenever the king went into the house of Yahweh, the guards would bring them and then take them back to the guard room. So whenever the king went from his house to the temple, they'd take these shields that were supposed to be unto Yah out of the king's house, put them in the temple for a hot minute, and then when the king left, they'd bring them back to the guard room at the king's house. And the rest of the acts of Rehoboam and all that he did, are they not written in the book of the annals of the kings of Judah? And there was fighting between Rehoboam and Jeroboam all the days. So Rehoboam slept with his fathers, and was buried with his fathers in the city of David. And the name of his mother was Naamah the Ammonitess. And Abiyam, his son, reigned in his place. You'd think it wouldn't be so hard to just do what Yah tells us to do. Clearly, we struggle with it. This is why we have a Mashiach, why we have a Messiah as an intercessor, but also to convict us and to send us the Holy Spirit, which we know from John 16 convicts us concerning sin, which is lawlessness, 1 John 3 verse 4, concerning righteousness, which is blamelessly walking in the commands, Luke 1 verse 6, and concerning judgment, which is Revelation 19 verse 11, which we just read. So praise the Father, we have Yeshua, but that doesn't mean we get to be all willy-nilly and do whatever the hell we want because of the abominations of the nation, which many are living in right now in false worship. Chicken says, what's up? Shalom, y'all.